Hello all, I'm Sai and in today's video, I'm bringing to you my disappointing reads of 2024. 2024 has been a very good reading year for me. I was able to read books from a variety of genres, not just in fiction but also non-fiction. But it is a given that when we read such a plethora of books, there are meant to be some bad books or books that just totally disappoint us. So in this video, I'm going to talk about all such books which disappointed me in 2024. It's not like these are the only bad books or disappointing books that I read in 2024. There are even a few more, but I've chosen the top 10 for this list. I'm not ranking them in any order. I'm just going to talk about them in the order from which I read them from the beginning of the year. So without any further ado, let's get into the books right away. The first one is an Indian adult contemporary romance book, and this was also my book club pick for February. The book is The Perfect Us by Durjoy Datta. The best thing which I liked about this book was the first third of it. And after that, the book just got worse and worse, and towards the end, if not for the last page of the book, I would have rated this one not even 1 star because way too dramatic and way too sad for me. And it felt like the author was just repeating a pattern in most of his books, okay? I've read 2 other books by Durjoy Datta before this one, which are The Boy Who Loved and The Boy with a Broken Heart, which are also part of a series together. It's not like that series is any less sadder than this one. That's also sad, but it felt like that was the tone in which the author was taking the story. But this felt like he was tricking us with the first third, and then he wanted to make the story as worse as he can. And giving the title of the book The Perfect Us, despite such a disastrous and tragic story, just felt very, very bad for me. Both the main characters whom we see here are also people whom I was not at all attached with in any way, because both the main characters are so shallow and undetailed in my personal opinion. Especially the character around whom the entire story revolves, which is Dev, was way too problematic, and his love interest or wife Avantika was totally toxic too. So I'd rather have no one read this book for the rest of time if possible, but I know that the author is super popular and many people will end up reading this book. But this is not just one book which ended up disappointing me, but also made me hate it. The next 2 books are part of a series. I like the series as a whole, but according to me, the series ends with the first 3 books, and after that, everything that was added on to the series was just an extension, and it's not part of the original peak series, according to me, okay? I know that the series is still ongoing because the last book that was published is super popular. That book is also in this list. So, the first of these 2 books is A Coat of Frost and Starlight by J Maas. Now, don't get me wrong, I do love the series, okay? I love the series until the end of A Coat of Wings and Ruin, because that's practically when the story arc of Farah ends, and she's basically my favorite character inside the series. Even this book, I cannot say that I hate it, because after seeing the way in which the series ended with book 3, this felt like an unnecessary extension if you ask me. She could have easily published this as a collection of short stories, or just added this as a few more pages to the 4th or 5th book inside the series, which is A Coat of Silver Flames. Because everything that happens here is repeated in that book too, and also in not such a good way personally for me, because it felt like unnecessary detail for that book. If this is not a collection of novellas but just a collection of short stories, I would have liked this book, but it is obviously a collection of novellas, and most of them just felt kind of like fan fiction to me and just a setup for the next book. So this did end up disappointing me a lot, even though I did not hate it. Next, we have the sequel to that one, which is A Coat of Silver Flames, and this book I utterly hated, okay? This felt like the weakest of all the books inside the series for me, even though it seems like it has the most number of fans lately inside the series. For me personally, the second book inside the series is the best, and after that, the third book is the thing which comes closer to that. This one just felt like an unnecessary extension, and I know that the author has struggled a lot while she has written this book, but it felt like the main characters were just banging over and over again without any result until the end of the book, and the story as a whole did not convince me in any way to continue on with the series. And we've also gotten to know that the series is going to continue on with Nesta as the main character, so I'm totally not interested in reading any of the further books inside the series. If we come back to Farah and see her story, I'll definitely read the series, but if you're going to continue with Nesta, I sure am not going to read it, even though she is like ultimately powerful here. I know that many people will not like me for saying this, but this was just a bunch of smut that made use of mental health representation as a form of publicity for it, and for that reason, I definitely hate this book. I don't know if I'll be rereading this book if the series at all gets better in the future. For now, let's just give that space, but for 2024, I definitely hated this book. The next one is a contemporary book again, and it is The Last Family in England by Matt Haig. Now, I've read nearly 4 to 5 other books by Matt Haig before this one, and of all the books that I've read by him so far, this is the weakest if you ask me, because the story felt like it was being sad for the sake of being sad. And even the other book which I read before this one by Matt Haig last year, which is The Possession of Mr. K, even that was done in a better way, because it had good representation of, certain mental health conditions. But in this one, it did not feel like it did anything for me, despite a dog being the main character of the book. We are storing the entire story from the point of view of this dog who belongs to this nuclear family in England, and what all happens in their life and what happens to the dog in their family. Despite reading through it and despite hearing the story from the point of view of a dog and a few other dogs too, this book did not impress me in any way. It just made me feel sad and depressed after I finished reading it, because I feel like that was the motto of this book. I'm not saying that I'll not be reading any more Matt Haig after this one. I'll definitely read his other books. But with my experience with reading his other books before this one, this was definitely a letdown for me. Next, we have a reread of mine, and I did not expect this book to be a disappointing one after I reread it. Okay, and it is Raavan, Enemy of Aryavarta by Amish, which is the third book inside the Ramchandra trilogy or Ramchandra series now. Now, the first time I read this book, I was totally in love with it because I liked the way in which Amish Tripathi went forward and narrated the story of Ravana here. But after reading Asura in the beginning of this year in January and rereading this one nearly halfway through the year, I was totally disappointed in the way which Ravana was represented here. He was just shown as a bad person for the sake of being a bad person. There was no reason or layers for him being bad and what he's doing right now. His backstory was not as clearly explained and properly excavated as it was done in Asura for me, so this was definitely a letdown. While I went forward and started the reread of this book, I was in such anticipation because after my reread of the first two books, which are Ram and Sita, I liked both of those books more than I liked them the first time. But after I finished reading this one, I just felt so bad for Ravana in specific because I read his story in a totally different way in Asura, and coming to this book after reading that one just made this feel very feeble for me. So even though I don't hate the book, the turn it took here have been disappointing for me, and I've not continued on with the fourth book still. I hope I'll be finishing it by the end of the year. We are not sure though, but this for sure disappointed me. The next one is a historical fiction book, and it is Learned by Heart by Emma Donaghue. Now, I have not read anything else by this author before this one, but I know that she is very popular for her literary fiction books and historical fiction books, if I'm not wrong. So I had quite high expectations when I went to this book. And if I'm not wrong, one of the two main characters whom we follow here is an Indian girl who has been brought into England and brought up by white people and whitewashed basically. The love between her and the main character, who's another girl, is the story of this book. And the main problem that I felt with this book, despite the writing being good here and the characters shown to us properly, is that there was no point of the story at all. Everything was just happening on, and I was able to see the normal things that are going on in such a school in which these two girls are studying right now. And both of them were very different characters too. That is made vividly clear in the first few pages that we read the book itself. Writing was also decent and I was able to understand everything that I read. But once I finished reading the book, I felt like, okay, that was a story. I don't know whether it's a good story or bad story because it did not have any point at all. And even 5 to 6 months after reading the book, I still feel the same. I guess it should not have taken that long for me to even come to the fact that this does not mean anything to me. So it was definitely a disappointing book. The next one which we have here is a sci-fi book, and it is In the Lives of Puppets by J Klune. The only reason why I wanted to read this book is because it is written by J Klune. I think I purchased it last year and I read it in the first half of the year. Now, the concept of this book was really nice, and we don't have more than one human being inside this book. Every other person is a robot or some kind of other mission. The problem here for me was that despite there being a lot of humor and wit inside the story and the story also being streamlined, just like Learned by Heart, this book also felt like it had no point for me. It just kept going on and on and on. And even when we reached the end, I did not feel like there was any kind of closure at all for the story. I know that many people did like this book, and I also went in with really high expectations because, it's a sci-fi book and it's also standalone. Since it is also J Klune, I also expected some kind of warmth from it, which I did not get in any way. I think I may reread this sometime in the future if I get the time. But for now, it failed to impress me and left me unsatisfied. The next one is a book by a very popular author, and I think it is his latest release so far, which released in the beginning of the year, which is Maktub by Paulo Coelho. I listened to the audiobook of this one and it was nice. Okay, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with this book, but after I finished reading the book or listening to the book in this case, I felt like I did not take away anything from the book as I did from some of his other books which I read before. It's just a collection of different things that the author has learned from many of his teachers and many of his experiences in life. It definitely has the same kind of mystical tone that his writing has, and I adored that about the book so much. It's also a very tiny book. I think the audiobook was not even 3 hours long, so I was able to just sit down and finish it in just a single sitting. But after I finished reading the book, it did not stay in my mind as his writing usually does. There's usually a lot to reflect on when it comes to Paulo Coelho's books, but this one felt like there was no place for me to go forward and reflect on because it was just experiences of this author and I was not connecting with it in any way, so it ended up being in this list. Next, we have a self-help book which is too popular. Okay, I think this is way too much overrated for how it is being pushed in the internet, and it is Mindset by Dr. Carol S. Dweck. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? There's nothing wrong with this book, but it's just that it's not for everyone, okay? If you're someone who has read a lot of non-fiction books or self-help books in specific, this book has nothing different or more or new to offer you, because I felt nothing new in this book while I read it. I felt like, okay, the author's trying to say something, and as we move on, we'll be getting something new out of this. But until I reached the end of the book, there was only frustration for me, because the same thing gets repeated over and over and over again. She talks about what the growth mindset is and how we can benefit from it in multiple ways, and also gives examples of so many other people from across the world who have a growth mindset. But the one main thing which it failed on in a very exuberant way for me was not teaching anyone how to develop the growth mindset. If someone knows how to develop their own growth mindset, I don't think this book would have any significance at all. Everyone knows that if you have a growth mindset, you can succeed in life, you can make your life better. So the point should be to teach other people how to develop it, rather than just telling them over and over again with examples that if they do it, their life will get better, which is the only thing this book did. I know that I'm being a bit hard on it, but trust me, if you're someone who has a little bit knowledge of self-development, or if you have read some kind of self-help books, this will have nothing new to offer to you. So I think basically of all the books that I've added in this list, this was the most disappointing for me. Next, we have another book club pick, and it is The Travel Gods Must Be Crazy by Sudha Mahalingam. Now, this was quite an entertaining and fun book for me to read, and I also got to know about different parts of the world and what are all the customs and traditions that they follow there, because the author wrote them in a concise but not boring or, non-informative way. I got some data out of it, but if you ask me, the overall experience of reading this book was quite frustrating for me, because at times the author just uses words just because she knows it, and there's no reason or no need to use such words, because no one has the patience or time to go and look into the dictionary or on the internet for new words and their meanings in each and every page of the book, which was happening over and over here. And the other thing about the book is that at times the author became too whiny and too over dramatic, which is definitely not necessary for a non-fiction book, especially something like this one, which is very light-hearted. So even though I had a fun time, I had to try in order to have that fun. It was not effortless, and the drama here is way too much, and I highly doubt that all such drama actually happened while taking those trips. I will recommend others also to go forward and give it a read, because I think everyone can have some fun with this, but the experience of reading it and having that fun will not be easy. The last book in this list is the one which I had to delay filming this video for, because I finished reading this book just 2 to 3 days back, and I was very confused of whether to add this to this list or not, because by the end I did not like the book. But I had quite a nice time while reading it, even though it's not, such a great book if you ask me, and it is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Okay, I started reading this book on February 1st, 2024. And guess when I finished reading it? It was somewhere around December 7th, 2024. I took nearly 10 months to finish reading this book, and boy was it not worth it, because the prose is gorgeous. Okay, I give 100% marks for the prose and the writing of the author, because she wants to use 10 words in the place of 1 and build us the picture properly, and the vibes it gives are ecstatic. Okay, you cannot get this kind of vibes from any other book which doesn't have this kind of writing. But the story though is non-existent, because this is a book which is about stories. It's like an ode to stories, and I think that's where the author lacked, because there was no story here to start with. It was just pieces of different stories that was intertwined together with the help of beautiful prose. And I saw this YouTuber, and they said that this book is nothing but bees and keys, it's words. And that resonated with me so hard, because once I heard that line, I was able to understand that, yeah, this was just bees and keys and swords and nothing special. I wanted to rip this apart and throw it away, but I cannot do it because the prose is so gorgeous. Okay, I have literally a ton of highlights and annotations in this one, and the cover is also super gorgeous. I may never ever reread this book. At the same time, I'll never ever throw this away too. It kind of fried my brain while I was reading it, because, it was so turbulent. The character work is also not that great. It was like very, very mediocre if you ask me. So yeah, The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern is the last book that disappointed me the most in 2024, despite me taking 10 months to finish reading it. So yes guys, those are all the 10 most disappointing books that I read in 2024. I hope your disappointing books list was not this huge and this intensive as mine was, but I believe you will also have some disappointing books that you read in 2024. Please do let me know those in the comments, because that might even be books which disappointed you or I ended up loving. I hope this video was enjoyable and entertaining for you. If you did like watching it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you want to get more content from me, do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.